right, so get this. We're diving deep into AI policy today. And trust me, this is not your average policy snooze fest. We've got some seriously juicy insider info to unpack. Straight from Miles Brundage himself. You know the guy who just stepped down as a senior advisor for AGI readiness at OpenAI?
Yeah, it's fascinating because this isn't just someone who, dipped their toes in the OpenAI pool. This guy dove headfirst and spent 6 years there, started as a research scientist, even led the policy research and AGI readiness teams. This is someone who's seen the inner workings of one of the biggest players in AI. So when he decides to walk away, there's a story to tell.
And he's telling that story in his own words, in his Substack post, Why I'm Leaving OpenAI and What I'm Doing Next. So let's break it down. First things first, who IS this Miles Brundage? And why should we care what he has to say?
Well, besides his impressive time at OpenAI, Brundage also has a PhD and experience working in government. So this is someone who understands not just the technical side of AI, but also the policy implications. He's not just some tech bro with a hot take. He's got the credentials and the experience to back it up.
Okay, so we've established he's not just some random dude. But why ditch what many would consider a dream job at the forefront of AI? That seems a little counterintuitive, right? Wouldn't his impact be bigger at OpenAI?
That's where it gets really interesting. He actually argues the opposite. He says he felt stifled, like he couldn't truly explore the issues he felt were most critical, or publish his research without corporate constraints. He craved the freedom to be a truly independent voice, and he believes that his work will be more impactful from the outside.
So it's like he's saying, I can shake things up better from out here. That's a bold move, especially given OpenAI's reputation for pushing boundaries in AI development.
Speaking of which, what does Brundage have to say about OpenAI and the world's readiness for AGI, artificial general intelligence? Is this something we should be worried about now? Or is this still science fiction? Well, he doesn't sugarcoat it. He flat out says that neither OpenAI nor any other leading AI lab is ready for AGI, and neither is the world. And get this, he's so concerned about these gaps in readiness that he plans to dedicate the rest of his career to AI policy. That's a serious commitment. Whoa, hold on. The rest of his career?
Yeah.
This isn't just a passing concern for him. He's basically dropping everything to focus on this. That's got to make you wonder just how serious these risks really are. And it's not just about if we'll be ready eventually. It's about the huge gap that exists right now between how fast AI is developing and how slowly we're putting safeguards in place.
You know, this whole AGI term gets thrown around a lot, but it can feel kind of abstract. Like, is it here or is it not? Is it some super intelligent robot overlords? Or is it just a really good algorithm?
Brundage actually pushes back on that simplistic view of AGI. He thinks we need to move beyond this binary AGI or not thinking and start talking about levels of AI. Imagine it like a spectrum with increasing levels of capability and complexity.
So instead of freaking out about some Terminator scenario, we need to understand where we are on that spectrum, what the next level might look like, and how to prepare for it.
Exactly. And Brundage's team at OpenAI has actually been working on a framework to measure these different levels of AI. So keep an eye out for that research, because it could change how we talk about AI development altogether.
Okay, so let's say someone listening is thinking, wow, AI policy sounds fascinating. Maybe I should apply to OpenAI. Would Brundage give them the thumbs up or tell them to run for the hills?
He actually says yes in most cases, especially if you can contribute to a positive safety and ethics culture there. He emphasizes that every single role at OpenAI matters because their decisions have ripple effects on the entire AI field.
So it's not like he's saying OpenAI is the bad guy here. It's more nuanced than that.
Right. It's more like he sees the need for a multi-pronged approach. OpenAI needs to be doing its part internally, but he also believes there's crucial work to be done independently. He's not throwing stones. He's highlighting the need for all hands on deck.
All right, so let's get to the juicy stuff. What is Brundage doing next now that he's gone rogue? What's he putting all this energy into?
He's going all in on AI policy research and advocacy, launching his own nonprofit to tackle it head on. And he's not limiting himself to just the U.S. He's looking at the EU AI Act and aiming for global collaborations. This is about a worldwide approach to AI policy, recognizing that this isn't just a national issue.
Okay, so he's got the experience, the passion, and now the platform. What are some of his hot takes, the key things he's laying down about the current state of AI policy? What's got him fired up?
One of his big points is that we need to get serious about public discussion and policy choices now. He compares it to regulating railroads or electricity, powerful technologies that needed careful guidance to ensure they benefited society. We didn't just let those things run wild. And we can't afford to do that with AI either.
That's a great point. We talk about AI being the electricity of our time, but are we really taking the same precautions?
Exactly. And that leads into his next big concern, the speed or lack thereof of policymaking. He sees AI development racing ahead, while regulatory responses lag way behind. He's basically waving a giant red flag saying, hey, wake up. We need to catch up.
Yeah, that's a scary thought, especially when you consider how much hype there is around AI right now. Everyone's trying to be the first, the fastest, the most innovative. But what about safety? What about the long-term consequences?
That's what Brundage is worried about. And it's not just about companies doing the right thing on their own. He believes that relying solely on companies' self-interest isn't enough.
Wait, so even if companies have the best intentions, it might not be enough to prevent potential harm. Why not?
There's this potential for a misalignment between private and societal interests, especially when dealing with risks that are, say, completely new or potentially catastrophic. It's a lot like the tragedy of the commons, where individual actors pursuing their own gain can end up depleting a shared resource.
Okay, so we need regulations to create a framework that incentivizes responsible development, even if it means slowing things down a bit. Makes sense. But then there's the whole issue of international competition, especially between the US and China. Everyone's talking about this AI race, right?
And Brundage is very critical of that race against China mentality. He argues that it creates this dangerous pressure cooker, where we might end up sacrificing safety and security just to win. Imagine cutting corners on, say, autonomous weapon systems, just to be the first one with a killer robot army. That's a recipe for disaster.
Yikes. So it's not just about technological advancement, it's about the geopolitical implications too. And it sounds like Brundage is saying that this competitive mindset could actually make us less safe in the long run.
Exactly. He specifically mentions Taiwan as a potential flashpoint. Remember, Taiwan is a major hub for AI chip production. And if the US and China are locked in this AI arms race, that puts Taiwan in a very dangerous position.
So instead of racing to the bottom, Brundage is calling for international cooperation.
He believes it's essential. We need to be working together to address these risks, not trying to outdo each other. He even suggests that Western countries should actively seek to reassure other nations that their AI advancements aren't a threat to their stability. Imagine that, a world where we're collaborating on AI safety instead of viewing each other with suspicion.
That sounds like a much better world to live in. Okay, so we've covered some of Brundage's big picture concerns, but he also laid out 6 specific research areas that he's particularly focused on. These are the things that keep him up at night. Want to delve into those?
Absolutely. Let's start with the first one, which might seem kind of basic, but is actually incredibly important. How do we accurately assess and forecast AI's progress?
Yeah, that seems fundamental. How can we even begin to create effective policies if we don't have a clear understanding of where the technology is headed and how quickly it's advancing?
Right, and Brundage argues there's not enough unbiased research happening on this. He feels there's too much influence from industry and academia, potentially skewing the findings. It's like trying to get an accurate poll during an election, when everyone's got a vested interest in the outcome.
So we need more independent research, more objective analysis, and more transparency around the data. But even if we have accurate assessments, how do we communicate those findings effectively, especially to policymakers who might not be deeply immersed in the technical details?
Brundage believes we need to get better at connecting the dots between abstract research and real-world consequences. It's not enough to just say, hey, AI is progressing rapidly. We need to paint a picture of what that actually means for people's lives, for the economy, for national security. He even compares it to historical examples like the rise of Hitler or the early warnings about climate change, where the evidence was there, but action was slow.
It's about creating a sense of urgency, but without resorting to fear-mongering or hyperbole. It's about conveying the gravity of the situation, while also offering a path forward.
Exactly. And that leads into his second area of focus, regulating frontier AI safety and security. He's not talking about hypothetical risks here. He's saying that dozens of companies could have AI systems capable of posing catastrophic risks within just the next few years.
That's a pretty stark warning. So what are some of the concrete challenges he highlights in trying to rein in these incredibly powerful AI systems? It's not like we can just unplug them, right?
Right, it's not that simple. He points out that one of the biggest hurdles is figuring out how companies can prove that their AI is safe without revealing their secret sauce, their intellectual property.
The classic dilemma, transparency versus trade secrets. How do you strike that balance?
He's intrigued by the idea of developing methods that allow companies to demonstrate compliance with safety standards without giving away their competitive edge. He even draws parallels to arms control agreements, where similar challenges have been tackled, though not always perfectly.
Interesting. So it's about learning from past experiences and other high-stakes fields and adapting those lessons to the unique challenges of AI. Makes sense.
Exactly. Now, before we move on to his next research area, there's one more point I want to highlight from his discussion of AI safety. He argues that relying solely on companies' self-interest and safety isn't enough, even if a company has the best intentions. There's always the potential for blind spots, unforeseen consequences, or a mismatch between their priorities and the broader societal good.
So even if a company genuinely believes their AI is safe, there could be risks they haven't considered, or unintended consequences that they couldn't have anticipated. It's almost like we need a system of checks and balances to ensure that safety considerations aren't being overlooked. In the rush to develop and deploy these powerful technologies,
Exactly. It's about recognizing that the stakes are too high to leave it up to individual actors to self-regulate. We need a more robust framework, and that's where government regulation and international cooperation come in. Now let's move on to Brundage's third research area, which focuses on something that's probably on a lot of people's minds: the economic impacts of AI. He seems particularly worried about the potential for mass unemployment as AI systems become increasingly capable of performing tasks previously done by humans.
yeah, that's the one that tends to grab the headlines. Robots are coming for our jobs. But Brundage seems to be taking it a step further. He's not just talking about job displacement, he's talking about a fundamental shift in how we think about work and the economy.
He believes that a post-work world, where AI can meet most of our material needs, is closer than we think. And he's concerned that we're simply not prepared for this kind of societal upheaval. Imagine a world where most jobs are automated, where traditional notions of work and income no longer apply. How do we structure an economy in that kind of world? How do we ensure that everyone has access to the resources they need to thrive? These are the questions that Brundage is grappling with.
Wow, that's some serious food for thought. And it sounds like he's not just talking about tweaking existing policies. He's calling for a complete rethink of our economic paradigms. He even throws out ideas like a robot tax or a compute tax, acknowledging that we need fresh thinking in this area.
Exactly. He recognizes that these technological advancements aren't happening in a vacuum. They have profound implications for every aspect of our lives. And we need to start planning for those changes now, before it's too late. What's fascinating is that Brundage doesn't claim to have all the answers when it comes to this AI grand strategy thing. Instead, he's like throwing out these thought-provoking questions and urging us to grapple with them collectively.
It's like he's saying, here's the map, but we need to figure out the route together. One of the big dilemmas he highlights is how to balance the benefits of decentralized AI development, things like faster innovation and the diffusion of power, with the need for global coordination to manage risks.
It's a tricky balance, right?
Yeah.
On the one hand, you want to encourage experimentation and competition. That's how you drive progress. But on the other hand, you don't want a free-for-all where everyone's developing powerful AI systems without any regard for the potential consequences.
It's like trying to herd cats, except the cats are brilliant scientists, and the stakes are incredibly high. And it's not just about getting nations to cooperate. It's about aligning the incentives of all the different players involved: companies, researchers, governments, even individual developers.
He points out that there's this inherent tension between individual self-interest and the collective good. Think about it like climate change. We know we need to reduce emissions, but individual companies and countries are often hesitant to act because they fear it'll put them at a competitive disadvantage.
It's the classic tragedy of the commons. We all benefit from a stable climate, but no one wants to be the first to make sacrifices. And it sounds like Brundage is worried we could fall into the same trap with AI. Everyone wants to be at the forefront, to reap the rewards of this powerful technology. But who's thinking about the long-term consequences?
Exactly. And just like with climate change, we need a framework for thinking about the long-term impacts of AI, not just the immediate benefits or risks. That's why he suggests borrowing from the social cost of carbon, a metric used in climate policy,
Yeah.
and applying it to AI development. He calls it the social cost of silicon, which I think is brilliant.
Hold on, break that down for me. What exactly does he mean by the social cost of silicon?
Well, just like we can calculate the environmental cost of burning fossil fuels, Brundage is proposing that we develop a way to quantify the broader societal costs of developing and deploying AI systems. It's about factoring in everything, from job displacement and economic inequality to the potential for misuse and even existential risks.
Wow, that's a pretty radical idea. It's like saying, hey, before you build that super intelligent AI, let's add up all the potential downsides and see if it's really worth it. I can see why that would make some people uncomfortable, but wouldn't that stifle innovation?
That's the debate, isn't it? How do you balance the need for progress with the need for caution? How do you encourage innovation while also mitigating risks? Brundage isn't saying that we need to halt AI development altogether. He's just saying that we need to be more mindful, more deliberate, and more accountable in how we approach it.
It's like he's saying, let's not just race to the finish line without considering where we're going. So if we accept that we need this grand strategy for AI, what are the key principles that should guide our approach? What should our priorities be?
Brundage lays out a few key themes in his Substack post. One is the need to shift away from this us versus them mentality, particularly when it comes to international competition. He argues that framing AI development as a race against China, for example, is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, we touched on that earlier. It creates this pressure cooker environment where safety and ethics can take a backseat to national pride and the pursuit of dominance.
Exactly. He believes that we need to move towards a more cooperative model, one where nations are working together to share knowledge, establish safety standards,
Yeah.
and address common challenges.
So it's not about controlling AI, it's about steering it in a direction that benefits all of humanity. But how do you get everyone on board with that vision? It seems like such a utopian idea in today's world, where competition and self-interest often trump cooperation.
It's definitely a challenge, but Brundage believes it's essential. He even goes so far as to suggest that Western countries should actively seek to reassure other nations that their AI advancements aren't a threat to their stability. Imagine that a world where we're sharing knowledge about AI safety and working together to prevent misuse.
It's a powerful vision, and it certainly aligns with his emphasis on international cooperation. But even if we can achieve this kind of global harmony, there's still the question of how to translate these high-level principles into concrete policies.
Right, and that's where things get really tricky. Brundage acknowledges that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Different countries will have different priorities, different regulatory approaches, and different cultural norms.
So how do you create a grand strategy that's both globally relevant and locally adaptable?
That's the million-dollar question. And Brundage doesn't pretend to have all the answers, but he does offer some intriguing ideas. For example, he suggests that we could learn from existing frameworks, like the social cost of carbon used in climate policy, and apply those concepts to AI.
We talked about that earlier, the social cost of silicon. It's about quantifying the full range of AI's potential impacts, both positive and negative, and using that information to guide policy decisions. But is that even possible? How do you measure something as complex and multifaceted as the social cost of AI?
It's definitely a challenge, but Brundage believes it's worth exploring. He argues that if we can develop a robust framework for assessing the social cost of AI, it could revolutionize how we think about this technology and how we govern its development.
So it's not just about preventing the worst-case scenarios, it's about maximizing the potential benefits. While minimizing the harms, it's about steering AI development in a direction that aligns with our values and aspirations.
Exactly. And this brings us back to Brundage's own journey. He's clearly not content with just critiquing the status quo from the sidelines. He's taking action, launching his own nonprofit to tackle these challenges head-on.
He's putting his money where his mouth is, literally. And he's not just focused on research, he's also committed to advocacy, to pushing for policy changes that align with his vision for a more responsible and beneficial AI future.
And that raises a fascinating question. If someone with his level of experience and insight feels that he can have a greater impact from outside a major AI company like OpenAI, what does that say about the current state of AI governance?
It makes you wonder, are the existing institutions and power structures adequate for addressing the challenges posed by AI? Or do we need new models, new approaches, new ways of thinking to navigate this uncharted territory?
Those are the kinds of questions that Brundage is grappling with, and he's inviting all of us to join him on this journey.
It's an invitation to rethink our assumptions, to challenge the status quo, and to work together to create a future where AI is a force for good in the world.
Now, shifting gears slightly, let's dive deeper into one of the most pressing concerns Brundage has raised: the economic impacts of AI.
Okay, so we've talked about how AI could reshape the global landscape. and even rewrite the rules of the economic game. But how does that actually play out in the real world? What does this AI-driven future look like for everyday people?
Well, Brundage paints a picture that's both exhilarating and a little unsettling. He argues that we're rapidly approaching a point where AI can automate a vast majority of the jobs that currently exist.
So not just like factory workers and truck drivers,
Yep.
but also lawyers, doctors, even software engineers.
He believes no job is truly safe from automation in the long run. And that raises a really fundamental question. What happens to society when work as we know it disappears?
It's like that saying, if you can describe your job, an AI can probably do it. But seriously, what happens to our sense of purpose, our identity, our social structures, when work is no longer the central organizing principle of our lives?
Those are exactly the kinds of questions that Brundage is urging us to confront. He believes that we need to start rethinking our fundamental assumptions about work income and the very fabric of society.
So it's not just about retraining people for new jobs, it's about reimagining what a meaningful life looks like. In a world where traditional work is no longer a necessity, it's almost like we need a new social contract for the AI age.
Right, and he doesn't shy away from the potential for social unrest either. I mean, imagine millions of people suddenly finding themselves without jobs, without a clear path forward, and without a sense of purpose. It's a recipe for instability.
That's a pretty bleak picture, but is there an upside to this? Could a post-work world actually be a good thing?
That's the interesting part. Brundage acknowledges that this transition could be incredibly disruptive,
Right.
but he also sees the potential for something truly transformative. Imagine a world where AI frees us from the drudgery of work, where we have more time for leisure, creativity, personal growth. Imagine a world where our basic needs are met and we can pursue our passions without the constraints of economic necessity.
It sounds almost utopian, but let's be real. How do we get from here to there? How do we ensure that the transition to a post-work world is equitable and doesn't leave millions of people behind?
That's the challenge, and Brundage doesn't pretend to have all the answers. But he does offer some provocative ideas. He talks about the need for new economic models, like universal basic income, where everyone receives a guaranteed income, regardless of whether they have a job.
Universal basic income has been a hot topic for a while now, and it seems like AI is pushing it further into the mainstream. But is it really feasible? How do you fund something like that?
That's the big question. Brundage argues that we need to start thinking outside the box. When it comes to economic policy in an AI-driven world, he even floats the idea of a robot tax or a compute tax, basically taxing the very technologies that are automating our jobs.
The tax on robots. It sounds like something out of science fiction, but it's a fascinating idea. If machines are doing the work, shouldn't they contribute to the system that supports us?
It's definitely a thought-provoking concept, and it highlights the need for creative solutions as we navigate this uncharted territory.
Okay, so we've talked about the economic challenges, the potential for social disruption, and the need for bold new ideas. But let's zoom out for a moment and remember why we're even having this conversation. It's because Brundage left OpenAI to dedicate himself to shaping AI policy, to ensuring that this technology benefits all of humanity.
He is sounding the alarm, but he's also offering a vision of hope. He believes that if we approach AI development thoughtfully and ethically, and with a clear sense of purpose, we can create a future that's truly transformative. In a positive way?
It's a call to action for all of us, whether we're AI researchers, policymakers, business leaders, or just concerned citizens.
He's urging us to engage in the public debate,
Yeah.
to educate ourselves about the issues, and to demand that our leaders take this issue seriously.
He's reminding us that we have a choice to make. Do we passively accept the future that's being created for us? Or do we actively shape it to align with our values and aspirations? Do we let AI control us? Or do we control AI?
So I think Brundage's insights offer a really valuable roadmap for navigating the complexities of AI policy. He's encouraging us to move beyond those simplistic narratives of AI good versus AI bad, to embrace the nuances and complexities of this technology, and to work together to build a future where AI serves humanity, not the other way around.
It's a daunting task, but it's one that we can't afford to ignore. So as you go about your day, consider this. What role do you want to play in shaping the future of AI? It's a question worth pondering, and it's one that we'll continue to explore in future deep dives. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning. And